The architecture of a city tells us a lot about how its people think. So if you want to know more about the people of a place, start with the buildings. Welcome to my channel. Today we head to New York City for a closer look at our first American city. All right, let's talk about New York City. You know that place that's always there in the corner of your screen whenever you need a backdrop for talking about America? Yeah, that place. It's pretty important. So let's see what its skyline can teach us. We could start back in the 1600s when it was just a little trading post called New Amsterdam. But since that was before the invention of the skyscraper, we'll just go ahead and skip to the skyscrapers. Here's the thing about skyscrapers. They couldn't have happened without the invention of steel, which in turn is an entire video on its own. If you want to watch that, click here. But long story short, steel allowed builders to build tall structures quickly and cheaply, which meant New York was the perfect place for them to start going vertical. After all, land was expensive and there was no shortage of space above the congestion of the streets. The result, the skyscraper. Early on, this was the Flatiron Building. It's 22 floors of newspaper offices and advertisements, and is notable for being one of the first buildings to use a steel frame to support the structure. For a while, the triangular shape was a novelty, but soon developers wanted something a little fancier. Hence, we get the Woolworth Building. At 792 feet, it was the world's tallest building in 1913. There are so many things to love about this building, like the intricate terracotta work, and the way the ornate crown subtly calls out the building's function as a workplace. Not only was it a symbol of New York's status, it was also a symbol of the country's transition from agricultural to industrial economy. But not everyone loved skyscrapers. Some found the cramped conditions and lack of light on lower floors to be depressing, even dangerous. And maybe they were onto something, because eventually the city had to introduce fire codes and safety measures to ensure these vertical cities were livable. Speaking of vertical cities, have you ever heard of Grand Central Terminal? Okay, maybe it sounds boring, but this is where the term Grand Central comes from. When it was built, the train hall was so large it was almost a city unto itself. Once inside, you wouldn't need to go outside until you got to your final destination. And that feeling still remains today. Just look at how busy it is at rush hour. I bet if you looked hard enough, you could find someone you know in here. But if you really want to feel the pulse of the city, you've got to take a walk outside. And nowhere is that more apparent than in Midtown Manhattan, where some of the most famous skyscrapers were built. Like right here, the Chrysler Building was once the tallest building in the world. And just down the street is Radio City Music Hall. And right across from that is the Empire State Building, which was the world's tallest building for 40 years. Even though the Chrysler has 2 fewer floors than the Empire State, it's taller overall because of its ornate crown. This was part of a trend at the time known as Art Deco, which used decorative motifs from the machine age to inspire their designs. If you're looking for something more classic, though, you can't miss the Woolworth Building, which was the world's tallest building for a few years before the Chrysler. And if you want to see what's new, well, you're in luck because New York is always building up. New York City is one of the most densely populated places on the planet. That means that finding space for parks is pretty tricky. So when the city decided to build a park in the middle of Manhattan, it was a big deal. And Central Park is proof that New York can reclaim some of the wildness that made it great in the first place. Built in 1858, this 775-acre green space is the second largest park in any US city. And it's also one of the most visited places in New York. So next time you're feeling stressed, just take a walk through the park and relax. Or better yet, relax at home and watch this video instead. And don't worry, we haven't forgotten about the rest of the city. While Manhattan might get all the attention, Brooklyn is full of beautiful buildings too. In fact, there's an entire neighborhood called Park Slope, where you can find brownstones that date back to the 1850s. And these brownstones were popular with wealthy families because they provided a lot of living space in a small footprint. So they spread like wildfire throughout the city. We are going to fast forward a bit to 1939, when the city's skyline was forever changed with the opening of the World's Fair in Queens. The fair was supposed to be a celebration of modern technology and the future of America, but unfortunately it went bankrupt before it even ended. Still, the legacy of the fair lives on in the architecture of the Unisphere, the massive globe that sits in Flushing Meadows, Corona Park. It's a reminder of the city's ability to innovate and its role as a global leader. After World War II, the city's population boomed, and with it, the demand for office space, housing, and everything else in between. Much of this was driven by the booming corporate world, which led to an explosion in high-rise office buildings. And nowhere is this more evident than in Midtown Manhattan, where row after row of steel and glass towers dominate the skyline. Many of these were designed in the international style, which emphasized simplicity, functionality, and the use of new materials like steel and glass. The Seagram building was one of the first skyscrapers to use this style in New York, and it set the standard for corporate architecture in the city for decades to come. Unfortunately, not everyone was happy with these new developments. Some thought they were too tall or too impersonal. Others worried that they would cast too much shade over the city. But despite the criticism, the skyscrapers kept going up. Then in the 1970s, something remarkable happened. The city nearly went bankrupt. Now, this is a tale for another day, but the upshot was that the city was forced to change. And nowhere was this more apparent than in the South Bronx, where entire neighborhoods were abandoned, leaving behind ghost towns of shattered windows and graffiti. This wasn't just a problem for New York, it was a problem for the entire country. The media dubbed it arson, anarchy, and abandonment. But slowly, things started to change. People began to move back into the South Bronx, and it became the birthplace of hip-hop. Meanwhile, other parts of the city were changing too. The West Side Highway cut off access to the Hudson River, so the city decided to build a new elevated park called the High Line. This project breathed new life into the area and inspired other cities to rethink their relationship with transportation infrastructure. But perhaps the biggest change to hit New York City was in 1973, when the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center were completed. The minimalist style was a departure from the ornate buildings of the past, but it quickly grew on New Yorkers and became an iconic part of the skyline. Unfortunately, the towers were destroyed in 2001, leaving behind a gaping hole in the city's heart. But New Yorkers are a resilient bunch, and they didn't waste any time in planning for a new future. The rebuilding effort was massive. There were competitions held around the world to design the best memorial and new office buildings. And in 2014, the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere opened, One World Trade Center. The design was chosen from thousands of entries in an international competition and is a powerful symbol of the city's resilience. Of course, the World Trade Center isn't just about the tallest building, it's also about remembering those who were lost. That's why the memorial and museum are so important. They're a place to remember and reflect on the events of September 11, 2001. These days, New York City is always changing. Just ask Hudson Yards, the newest neighborhood in the city. Built on a former rail yard, it's the first neighborhood to be built in Manhattan in over 100 years. And it's been a huge success. In fact, the New York Times called it the neighborhood of tomorrow that's here today. So what does the future hold for New York City? Well, we'll have to wait and see. But one thing's for sure, it will continue to amaze us with its innovation, diversity, and resilience. So keep an eye on New York City, because you never know what it'll do next. What did you think? Do you know of any other ways that New York's skyline reflects its people? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. It helps us produce more videos like this. Thanks for watching. See you next time.